teaching from perfectingtheworld.com.
We are gathered to engage in a rigorous scholarly inquiry regarding a matter of profound halachic and historical significance. Recently, a red heifer calf named Temimah was born on a dairy farm in the hills of the Galilee, displaying a strikingly pure red coat. This event has understandably ignited profound hope among those dedicated to the restoration of the temple service in Jerusalem. However, as students of the sacred texts, our duty is to approach this development not merely with enthusiasm, but with exacting reverence for the law. We must meticulously analyze the halachic validity of this modern candidate against the uncompromising standards established by the sages. We commence our examination with the absolute, uncompromising biblical standard of perfection required for the red heifer, or para aduma. The Book of Numbers, chapter 19, verse 2, delineates this requirement without ambiguity. It mandates the selection of a heifer that is Temimah, which translates to perfect, in which there is no mum, or blemish, and upon which a yoke has never come. This is not a generalized request for an aesthetically pleasing animal. Rather, it is a strict legal statute. The mandate of absolute perfection forms the foundational threshold that any candidate must meet before it can even be considered for the sacred service of providing the purifying ashes for the nation of Israel.
To properly interpret the biblical text, we must understand how the sages defined the state of Temimah. They taught that Temimah demands absolute and unyielding wholeness. To quantify this wholeness, they rigorously applied the detailed laws of blemishes which were originally developed for other sacred offerings. It is crucial to recognize that these standards were not formulated in an abstract theological vacuum. Rather, they were derived directly from the everyday agricultural reality of the land of Israel. The sages rooted their legal parameters in the soil, the barn, and the daily life of ancient farmers, ensuring that the sacred laws were inextricably bound to the physical realities of the natural world.
This foundational principle of agricultural reality is clearly delineated in Mishnah Bakoret, chapter 6, Mishnah 1. The text establishes specific, measurable criteria for disqualifying an animal based on interventions to its body. It decrees that a blemish occurs if the ear is damaged from the cartilage, if it is split, if it is dried out, or, critically, if it is pierced melokarshina, meaning a hole the size of a karshina seed. The sages deliberately listed these as separate, distinct categories of disqualification because they thoroughly understood the specific vulnerabilities of living animals in the field. They provided precise physical measurements to ensure the law could be applied with absolute consistency. To accurately comprehend the specific standard of melokarshina, we must look closely at the karshina itself, commonly known as the bitter vetch seed. In ancient Israel, this plant grew abundantly and served as common fodder for livestock. The sages deliberately selected this seed as the unit of measurement because every person working the land knew its size from routine handling in the feed troughs. Furthermore, the bitter vetch was burned to produce bori karshina, an alkaline substance utilized in preparing the temple incense, known as the ketoret. This humble seed establishes a precise, universally understood halachic threshold of roughly 3 to 5 millimeters for any acceptable perforation.
As diligent scholars, we must rigorously contrast this ancient agricultural threshold with modern livestock practices. In the era of the sages, a minor scratch or prick from the thorn might be evaluated against the karshina standard. Today, however, the modern reality of livestock management relies heavily on commercial ear tags. When applied, the tagging tool drives a pin through the ear cartilage in a single, forceful motion, creating a permanent perforation of 5 to 8 millimeters, or sometimes even larger. Therefore, the standard commercial tagging process instantly and definitively exceeds the permissible Mishnaic measure of 3 to 5 millimeters at the very second the intervention takes place.
This brings our scholarly inquiry directly to the modern candidate, Temimah. Shortly after her birth in the Galilee, she was tagged with a standard white plastic marker numbered 73359. Reports have surfaced highlighting her rapid, clean healing after the tag was removed 8 days later. However, halakhic jurisprudence requires us to recognize a central truth. The act must be evaluated precisely at the moment of the intervention, not solely upon its subsequent healing. The Beit Midrash at the National Red Heifer Research Institute has rightly placed this event under strict scrutiny. Under the law, the initial piercing removed her from consideration, as the breach occurred at a scale that immediately violated the established ancient metrics.
Furthermore, the application of this standard agricultural tag triggers not just one, but multiple independent layers of halakhic disqualification as outlined in the Mishnah. First, consider the primary piercing itself, which initiates a mum by exceeding the melokarshina measure. Second, the applicator mechanism routinely engages and inflicts severe damage upon the cartilage, or schikis, which constitutes a completely separate category of blemish.
Finally, we must examine the risk of the dried-out condition, where the affected tissue may lose vitality or flake after the breach. Each of these factors stands as an independent legal ground that fundamentally compromises the requirement of Temimah.
To grasp the finality of this event, we must understand this irreversible piercing in direct parallel to the biblical prohibition against a yoke coming upon the animal. The sages ruled that even the mere act of placing a yoke upon the heifer, without any actual labor being performed and without any physical mark being left behind, permanently alters its sacred status and invalidates it. The intervention itself permanently crosses a sacred boundary. The ear tag piercing operates under this exact same principle of irreversible intervention. Healing does not and cannot undo the halachic event that is already transpired. Once the measure is exceeded, the sacred status is irrevocably lost.
Recognizing this reality, our academic analysis must transition into practical application. The birth of Temimah serves as a vital pedagogical moment. It is imperative that formal, fully funded protocols are implemented on modern farms across the land of Israel. Israel must establish a clear statute mandating that every red heifer candidate receives an examination by qualified halakhic experts prior to any standard farm intervention or ear tagging. Reforming our agricultural protocols to respect these ancient parameters ensures that future candidates are protected from routine procedures that would unwittingly compromise their sacred status from the very moment of their birth.
The path forward demands faithful adherence to the sources. The sages possessed profound wisdom, recognizing that the parameters of perfection were intimately tied to the Karshina fodder lying in the manger. If we're to achieve the sacred restorations we seek, our modern enthusiasm must be matched by an equal measure of halakhic precision. We must close our books, walk into the fields, and align our modern agricultural realities with the enduring wisdom of our texts. Are we truly ready to align our modern farms with these sacred laws?
Join the perfectingtheworld.com community today.